Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, how people get their breaks, and how they develop their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is a podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. David Beddy is the Director of FMS Interior Services, a furniture source, supply, installation and design service championing sustainable solutions with over 30 years experience, delivering large-scale contracts to universities, businesses and local government bodies throughout the UK. David has developed an approach that focuses on sustainability, long-term client relationships and evolving market trends. This strategic and value-driven approach transforms furniture selection, design and life cycle management, helping organisations operate effectively and more sustainably. I've worked with David and FMS Interiors as a design specialist for over 12 years, supporting their sales team and helping to promote good design and responsible and sustainable specification of furniture. I spoke to David in August 2026. In this episode, we discover the importance of developing a dialogue about what to do with existing furniture, how a systematic approach can help multi-site organisations, the importance of buying the right choice of furniture at the start of a project, how working closely with designers can fast-track a project, and why, if you want to get somewhere fast, you should go slowly, but not too slowly. David, thank you for joining me on the Multi-Story Thinking podcast. And, when I'm fishing around for potential guests, I'm always thinking, who do I know that I could interview? And we've worked together for quite a long time and it never even crossed my mind to think about you because probably we were so familiar with each other but we've been working quite a long time. But you've been in the business running FMS Interiors for quite a long time, furniture supplier, but that sort of doesn't really capture everything the business does. But can you give me just a bit of a background of how you got started?
I mean, it's coming up to 35 years next year, in one way, shape, or form. I mean, and what's really interesting about it is that originally we set up as furniture management services, which is what FMS stands for, where we were basically going to provide all the services associated with furniture, which is, move it, store it, refurbish it, respray the metalwork, refabric, all that sort of stuff, and move it about, reconfigure it. And we were very successful back in the 1990s at actually doing that for companies where they had invested in furniture where they were paying £2,500 to £3,000 a desk. And I suppose the thing that happened towards the late 90s is that the price of that furniture came down substantially to the stage where a traditional workstation you could now buy for about 700 quid. And the desk part of that you could buy for about £250. So therefore and the need for people to manage furniture didn't appear to be as prevalent as it was, because it wasn't all necessarily interconnected. And there wasn't as much.
I was going to say that the management of furniture is quite an interesting concept because people don't really think about that. They buy furniture, it sits there, and they end up having to get rid of it because it breaks or
Mhm.
it's not the style that they want. But you saw an opportunity to provide that kind of service, which is essentially really a sustainable approach, isn't it? I mean, when people talk
Very
about,
much. Yeah, I think the funny thing is that now, 35 years later, it's come full circle. And all of the services that we have always been offering, now people are looking for. It was very much a sustainable approach. And we were very successful at the time in supporting what was then an office dealer network in supplying them, let's say, 50 or 100 or 200 refurbished workstations at the time that they were probably trying to sell a client another 500 new, so that they made the costs of the deal work for the client and therefore retained the client. The So I mean, one example of uh, where we basically drove sustainability to its highest level was, I think it was Sun Alliance down in Bristol, who were in across 7 buildings in Bristol, and they were moving out to one new building in Parkway Gate, and basically they had about, I think, 700 people to move, and we devised a scheme whereby they bought 70 new workstations, and they moved 70 people out to Parkway Gate. And as soon as they'd left their desks, we moved in, dismantled all the furniture, took it back to Warrington, resprayed the metalwork, and put it all back together again, and then delivered a 70 down to, sort of 2 weeks later, down to Parkway Gate. Then they moved another 70 people across, and they moved another 70 people across, and then we did the same process again. And we did that until all 700 people were moved. And
so it's really
the,
responsive and
yeah,
kind of
they
help.
reused the furniture that they had, even though they didn't know it. There's minimal ejection of new carbon footprint into their buildings, and essentially, and they paid probably less than 50% what they would have paid to furnish the building with new furniture.
So was that a radical kind of approach in that era of the recycling approach,
I
reuse?
think our approach has always felt a little bit radical. In those days, we used to draw an experience curve for furniture, and uh, we used to draw that experience curve graph and show the furniture as having 4 different lives. And the first life was when it was brand new in the let's say in a bank or insurance company or whatever, or a tech business. The second life was when we had uh, taken it out, but it was good enough to put back in to somebody else. The third life was when it came out of that person and it got refurbished. And the fourth life was when it was really on its knees. But that was possibly after 20 years. And that's when we would have broken it down, sent the metal off to metal workers, sent the melamine, the MD off back to be broken down and used for uh, to create more wood chip effectively.
Yeah.
And it was, yes, we were doing it without, um, we were doing it under the guise of managing people's cost and their cost of managing furniture, which was often at least as much as the cost of buying it. But in reality, we were creating a sustainable process. Now, what, almost 35 years ago.
So I mean, that's amazing sort of thing, and the what was the rationale behind that? Was that a niche in the market that you spotted, or were you really into sustainability? You know, like
I think it came out of the fact that Steelcase, who were the biggest furniture company in the world, had developed a program, a consultancy program, which looked to highlight the costs of managing furniture. Funny thing that happened, I think it was back in around 1992, that Federal Express decided to close down 4 buildings in the UK. A company in America came over to the UK to sell it, to buy the furniture. And they bought the furniture and realized that Steelcase furniture in the UK was different to Steelcase furniture in America. And so therefore they tried to sell it within the UK where there was no market. But before they went away, before they left, they fell across us and we bought the furniture off them. And out of that, we created a model similar to what they had in America, whereby we would buy tranches of furniture that was good quality, uh, already used once, and refurbish it and resell it back into the marketplace, usually via the dealer network that existed at that time. And yeah, it was very, very effective. And the at a time when a lot of companies were looking uh, to keep their costs as low as possible, as they always are. Nothing has changed in that aspect. It almost seems a little bit weird that what people paid £3,000 for in 1990, they'll now pay £300 for it and still resent it.
They still don't want to pay the money for it.
Yeah, exactly.
How's the role of FMS and the furniture suppliers in general changed over those 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly. I think a lot more has changed since 2008, because up to that point, everybody tended to work very much within a dealer network. Furniture companies tried to sell into a dealer network, and the dealers more or less kind of they didn't hold the power as such, because but they would drive the sale process, and they would add on the services like design and installation and delivery and all that sort of stuff. The But the furniture business in the UK is very fractured, in the sense that there are hundreds of companies that make furniture, either from very small specialist companies with one or two people, right up to people the likes of Senator, where they're employing a few hundred people and turning over a couple of 100 million. But it is a very fractured market, and I think the thing that has been happening over the last, I think, as the generations have changed, the things that have been happening is that manufacturers aren't relying on the dealer network anymore. Again, because everything always seems to be a hammering down of cost. So having dealer managers to support the network is largely unsustainable these days. And we're seeing more and more of let's say, the mid-range manufacturers just going direct themselves and cutting out the dealer.
Okay, so
And
just to clarify, where you sit between the client and the manufacturer, you're not a dealership as such, are you? But you are a kind of middle person, aren't you, between?
yeah, I've always put it in the terms that we've always operated as a free house. So, in other words, our job is that we are client focused, and that we are helping the client to make sure they've got the furniture that is right for them. So, in other words, there aren't 10 manufacturers that we represent and they're all we're going to consider. We're in theory representing all the manufacturers in the UK, and we would pick the products that are the right ones for the client and at the right budget for the client. And that's more important to us, because the raison d'etre for us is that we're helping multi-site organizations primarily control the look and feel of their buildings. And a multi-site organization can be, it could be somebody like uh, it could be a university that's got 20 buildings on site. It could be a student accommodation company that has got 60 or 100 buildings that they have to manage. It could be somebody, an office like the Met Office, for instance, which has got a huge number of small outlying locations and some mid-sized locations around the UK that they have to support. So we're all the time looking at the client and trying to help them with the furniture that is most appropriate for them, and help them to manage that process. And more recently, helping them to manage the carbon footprint within their organization, so that they've got real opportunities to drive their business towards net zero, which is probably a panacea. But it would be very remiss of us if we weren't trying to help them to do that.
Yeah, so sustainability, I mean, you kind of built the business on that concept, really, of providing a sustainable option. But that's becoming really one of the things most people are talking about these days. Have you adapted much in respect to that, or are there other aspects of what you do that have shifted slightly to sort of to align with the way people are thinking at the moment?
I don't think we have had to adapt that much. I think because I think it's always been inherent in our attitude. Because every time we've gone into a company to talk about anything, we're always considering the legacy furniture. We've always done that. So I think the biggest change for us is that some of the terminology is adapting to the terminology people want to use now. But the attitudes and the concepts that need to underpin a sustainable approach, they've always been with us. But the interesting bit in reality is the fact that people talk a lot about sustainability, but then ultimately 90% of the time it still comes down to price. And it's very interesting. I had a company a couple of years ago now that where they were looking to change over their chairs. And I was very excited because one of the chairs I introduced to them was a chair that was net positive for the environment. And out of the 9 or 10 chairs that they looked at, it was the only one that they dismissed immediately. And I actually thought that they would get as excited as me about the concept, but they didn't.
Okay, so people they like the idea, but they're not prepared to pay for it. Was it more expensive then, or?
No, not particularly. No, I think that the value would, in comparison to what was ultimately chosen, would have worked out. But it's just interesting, I suppose, in the sense that you know people would still like what they like, and in some respects, are we waiting for all the traditional companies to change to where they can all tick that net positive box?
Right.
So in
Yes.
other words, if I'm driving a BMW, yeah, I know this other car might be more environmentally friendly, but I could wait till BMW catch up. There's almost a sense of that at the moment.
It's fascinating the sort of perceptions of your clients. When can you give me a bit more of sort of an insight into how you actually engage with clients and the different ways in which you build those relationships?
I suppose the essence with what we're doing is still an awful lot of our business comes via tender, where you don't really have that much control of the client. But what you do find with tenders that they are very much geared towards recognizing sustainable approaches and stuff like that, and the environmentally friendly approach, everything that it's all in there. It's then what we like to do is we like to get involved with the client at several different levels. And if we look at a multi-site organization, we would argue at any point in time that, let's say a client has got 70 buildings, they're probably in a process of refurbishing 5 to 10 of those every year. They're possibly selling off some of the buildings and buying new ones. So they've got new builds happening. And then they've got churn that is happening all the time within the rest of the building. And what we're trying to do is continually recognize and help them with that churn, for instance. So if you're going to close a building down, let's have a look at what's inside that building first. And can we actually go in and rescue a load of the product and decide what to do with it? Well, is that end of life, in which case let's break it down in a sustainable fashion? Is it refurbishable, in which case let's take it back now, refurbish it, and then next year let's push it back into the estate, refurbished and at a much lower cost. And some of the furniture it's perfect. Let's take it out and let's just move it elsewhere in the estate now. Now, it sounds very simple when I say it, but it's a much more complicated process, and there's quite a lot of logistics involved, and that's where the cost comes into it. And therefore, you might look at it ultimately. Some people will look at it and say, "Do you know what? By the time I've done all that, I might as well buy new." But if you do that, you're potentially risking the opportunity to manage that product, for it to be not managed, and to actually head off in various different directions. And one of the direction that is not properly set up is one where there are outlets to push the furniture out to. So in other words, the client will come and say, "Well, tell you what, you take it all, and why don't you sell it?" Yeah, well, I'm sorry, but I haven't got anybody else who will buy that furniture yet. So then you're left in a loop of, do I have to get a warehouse to store it? Da, 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 da. So the whole thing works properly as a concept if the client is prepared to recognize the movement of the carbon footprint around their own portfolio of buildings. That's what's exciting about working with multi-site organizations. And effectively, I suppose if you go back 30 years ago, those organizations would have teams of people who probably looked at doing that. In fact, we used to do it for one of our clients, take down 70 workstations in Aberdeen and move them to Bracknell, that sort of thing. But effectively, we are a variable overhead for these companies because they don't have to employ us and pay our salaries, but we will do work on their behalf to allow the movement of their furniture to be a well-oiled machine.
So that, I mean, you're talking about an organization that's got the capacity to move stuff around, enough change within the business dynamics of the people that are working there that requires change,
Yeah,
and and a consciousness of the benefits, I suppose, of retaining some of that stuff rather than just getting rid of it.
yeah, yes. And Jonathan, inherent in that as well, it's actually encouraging the client to buy the right product at the beginning.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of an example that we always use with people is when they come to visit us, we show them two chairs. One of them has come from somebody who's just imported it from the Far East, and the other is one that we imported from the Far East. But as we always tell them, we'll pay $5 or $6 or $10 more in the Far East to buy the chair that we buy because it is much more uh, sturdier and likely to last an awful lot longer than the one that most importers will bring in. And that's the important thing, is that when we're looking at furniture going into premises, we're looking at furniture that's going to stay there potentially for 30 years, not break after a year,
Yeah.
not break after 2 years. And and I'm continually astonished by the amount of churn that happens in organizations because, for instance, they go and buy a £50 chair, whereas if they bought a £90 chair, it would last 3 times as long.
With your clients then, are there things that clients should be asking about products and should be educating themselves about it, or do you find that's your role to introduce those concepts to them?
Very often it feels like that you have to hit on the client that understands the argument. Yeah, it's it's the to me it's not a uh, what was it? Yeah, one of the issues with it is if you take, let's say, a building where there's somebody wants to buy 300 chairs or whatever at 50 quid. Well, it's only a £15,000 decision, and the financial people are probably making much bigger decisions every day of the week. And this one is just doesn't go above the parapet. Yeah. And classic example I find, for instance, when looking at some of the in the student accommodation area, for instance, in the last 5 years, we've had a plethora of purchasing people joining student accommodation private hall providers. And they're all very, very good and very, very professional. But when they have a look at it, when it comes to things like furniture and that, really the only thing that has any kind of substantial value that appears to be being replaced all the time is mattresses. So suddenly, when you look at that, you then say, well, okay, we'll go out to tender for our mattresses and do that every year. Well, really, there's an argument there that says, why not buy a better mattress and you won't have to go out to tender every year? But you know, again, the financial people don't get involved in that argument. But we would go into a company like that and say, well, actually, yeah, we'll buy the mattress from wherever you want to buy the mattress, but we recommend buy that. It'll last longer. That it'll last longer. But if we're going to go into the rooms with the mattress, why don't we go in with a chair? Why don't we go in with a mirror? Why don't we go in with a waste paper basket? Why don't we go in with a notice board? Do it all at the same time. So in other words, you end up with one logistics charge rather than 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And but it all does come down to what is the relative budget and to what extent people are motivated to want to control that budget. And I think I'm very conscious that when you have multi-site buildings, you know, it, for instance, in the high-rise market, the big issue for the last since Grenfell has been cladding, and everybody's spending loads of money on cladding. That's a much bigger expense and a lot more important than how much are we spending on furniture at the moment.
So it's a kind of attitude towards furniture within the procurement system, isn't it? And
Yeah, I would say so. And part of our role is actually going back to people every year and giving them the information, saying, look, this is what you bought. If if we're properly engaged with the client, we're going back to them and sitting down with them and saying, look, last year, there you go. You've got 50 sites. The average spend per site was X. These are the products that you were buying. Actually, if you look at this, you bought 5 different types of chair. Why are we not just focusing on one different type of chair? But for instance, when we look at a task chair for an organization, we'll try and find a task chair where we know we can supply replacement casters, replacement gas lifts, replacement bases, replacement seats, replacement backs, so that if there's something wrong with the chair, they can actually maintain it on site. I've always taken the view that if you go into any organization, you'll probably find a storeroom with about 20 to 30 broken items of furniture. And if you send a good furniture fitter in there for a day, he'll give you back 15 good ones.
Fixed a lot of them. Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, I've witnessed that. In various workplace and university environments. The sad, slightly bent flip-top table that's lost a bolt somewhere. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
so it's getting into the getting the client into the mindset of the longevity of furniture and the ability to repair and replace. That's
yeah. But it's also
challenging.
it's a total systematic approach. See, I think the issue in the marketplace is that somebody who's there selling you new furniture really doesn't want to do the services. They really don't want to do the send a fitter down into the office and once a quarter see what's broken and mend it, because there's not much money in that. But my view is that it's the whole gambit, and it's a little bit like the uh, when uh, when we used to buy the old steelcase furniture secondhand and refurbish it. The number of people who would come to me and say, "Oh yeah, I believe you buy secondhand furniture," and I go along and I go and visit them and say, "Okay, so what are you trying to achieve here?" They say, "Well, we're moving office, but it's okay. We bought the new furniture." And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why isn't the person that is getting the £200,000 deal for new furniture sorting out this for you? Yeah. So we feel it's our duty almost to help the client sort out all of the aspects surrounding furniture. And when you take that all into account, the old rules from the early 90s still apply. You probably spend 50% more, 50% of the money during its lifetime managing the furniture as you do buying it. So let's buy it properly and let's have a proper management system to look after it.
So you're looking at
And
that long-term relationship there, where you can add
totally,
value
yeah,
and
yeah,
be the support
yeah,
network system, I
and
suppose.
yeah, and we're not interested in just one project. We're interested in do the projects and the regular work. We're the project and the churn. We want to do it all for you. We want to support you on all of it. We want to be there to advise and guide. What you need is in Aberdeen tomorrow for a bit of advice and guidance. We'll be there. Yeah, and and that's when we analyze our client base now. It's lovely because it's made up of. Uh, I think last year when I looked at our turnover, the amount of business we did with people, I went down to 10,000, but under £10,000 turnover before I found a client that wasn't multi-site. Now, multi-site can be a council that has got a whole load of social housing dwellings and a whole load of their own offices. Multi-site can be a university that has got 3, 4, 5, 20 buildings on site. Multi-site can be a student accommodation private halls where they've got something in 22 cities. Uh, multi-site can be it can be a big tech company that's got offices in 10 or 12 different cities. So multi-site can be, it could be a council where you're delivering into their warehouse because they're going to deliver it to multiple sites.
Yeah.
It could be a contractor that's working on 6 different projects at the same time in different areas of the country. They all qualify as multi-site, and we're there to help them with all aspects of the management of the process as well as the provision. Yeah, and within all of that, Jonathan, as you'll appreciate, inherent in all of that is making sure as well that they're buying it at the right value and the appropriate value for what the project is. And again, here's where I would argue, for instance, that if you're designing products to go into a hotel that's charging 400 quid a night for a room, that's different. That is different proposition than if you're buying furniture to go into a student accommodation site where they're charging 30 quid a room per night. You put the hotel furniture in there and arguably it doesn't work.
Well, I understand the kind of financial implications of that, but there's also the kind of design direction, isn't there, of what's appropriate for different settings. And you work across a wide range of sectors, from local authority to care homes to student accommodation into office, councils, and a wide range of different environments where one product is not necessarily almost exactly the same function potentially, but it's not going to be appropriate. So it's understanding the value, isn't it, and the
The,
perceived value, and also the what it, how it fits within a scheme and within the design and the ethos of the business that they are. Clients don't seem to have that kind of understanding. So you mentioned you've done a lot of tenders where products are coming through that they've been specified. Now I know from working with you over the years that you are able to just price up a list, aren't you? You can do that, but you also are quite keen to sort of suggest alternatives, and also working quite closely with interior designers and architects. That's one of the things that you're really sort of strong with about
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's changed over the last 30 years is that the designers used to be employed by the furniture dealers, um, and they weren't necessarily interior designers, but in the last certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, I think the designers have become more independent, and and they're tending to, again, it's almost like design has been outsourced. And there, there's some fantastic designers in the UK, some wonderful people that do some fantastic schemes, and I'm continually uh, humbled when I see the results of some of the schemes that we've worked on, where we're there looking at the spreadsheet and looking at the furniture that we're supplying. And when we see the finished result the designer has created, it's absolutely stunning. And I always feel very humble. And but the thing that we do, and what people have said to us, is that they like the way in which we interface between the designer and let's say a contractor, so that we can manage the process, so that the the contractor and the end client are getting a value proposition that works for them without losing any of the attributes that the designer has brought to the table. And a lot of time we interface with the designer themselves because it's their design. We don't want to screw it up for them. And what really works from our point of view, when we can interface with the designer at the front end before they give their finished proposal to the client, because we're able to reduce the number of iterations that go from the designer to the contractor to the client, or from the designer to the client, because we're able to advise the designer that actually, why use that fabric? Why not try this one? This has the right attributes. Actually, uh, the foam that you're specifying for that chair, it hasn't got the right fire rating. So why don't we do this instead? Or have you considered this? Look at this look and feel. And it works very, very well because the ultimately the designer will know what works for them. Our job is to help guide them so to what is a workable proposition for their client, reduce the amount of time that it gets to the stage where away we go. And what we find is where we're working at the front end with the design, the time between the initial design and the approval is crunched down with concertinas. Yeah. And therefore, the time uh, from the initial stage of the design to delivery of the end product is also concertinaed as well. And that's the bit that takes up an awful lot of time with the between the client, the designer, the contractor, the builder, whoever it is. Yeah. And our mission is to try and make that more efficient, while at the same time value engineering it without losing any of the design attributes that make it a wonderful solution in the end.
Yeah. So we're not compromising the integrity of the design.
Oh, absolutely not. Can't do
Yeah.
that. That would be counterproductive. Yeah,
Yeah.
but but I will be opinionated about things. I mean, I've been to a wonderful site probably 10 years ago now, and I remember seeing these sofas there, which absolutely looked fantastic. But I knew those sofas were £3,000 each, and I subsequently saw them in the same client's head office, and they're absolutely fantastic. But the problem is that when they break, the budget to replace them is £300. for £500, not 3,000, and they will break. But more importantly, when I looked at those sofas, what I found was nobody ever sat on them because they were too low.
Uh-huh.
Literally, I never saw anybody sitting on those sofas.
Yeah.
And there must have been £40,000 worth of sofas there. Maybe it was the right thing to do. I don't know. But that's the one where we point out, well, those sofas are a bit low. Do you really want those? Blah, 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 etc.
I think there's a thing about, the relationship between designers and suppliers where, as a designer, you never really know enough about it, enough about what's out there, what the options are.
Yeah,
And what
you can't.
what I've noticed from the way in which you operate is that, you've got this wide range of suppliers from across the UK and Europe and further afield. And there's a real understanding, not just of what's out there and available, but also the technical knowledge of how things are put
Yeah,
together. So you recognize systems. I mean, there's a great range of Italian suppliers where they've got componentry essentially that can be built into any combination, and the what that unlocks is the ability to customize, ability to replace and repair. But you've got that knowledge built into your kind of ethos, haven't you?
yeah, we do. But I think that what I bring it back to a lot of the time now is that the, there are, are you a company that understands furniture, or are you a box shifter?
Yeah.
So if you're just box shifting, then that's you're just going to sell anything to the client, and the client says, "Oh, I want the cheapest price," and the client ends up with something that breaks. Yeah. If you understand the furniture, you're always going to consider what is appropriate. If you take the £3,000 sofa example again, don't object to a £3,000 sofa going in if, when it's getting broken or tatty, it can be repaired and refurbished to look like it originally looked. And we're in tune with that. We like to do that. So therefore, if somebody says, well, I want a statement sofa in there, we'll find and advise on the statement sofa that allows us to do all those things uh, as it works through its life in the organization. Because what we don't want is a £3,000 sofa that stays there for 3 years. We want a £3,000 sofa that's going to stay there for 10 to 15 years. It's something we're working on at the moment, which is to have a task chair for one client sector that we've got. And it's a task share where we will totally offer replacement parts. So the client never has to lose the initial investment they put in the chair. And we're going to buy it in and stock it on that basis. And it's going to be at a price that's reasonable, and it'll have a warranty that's reasonable. That's part of our job. We understand the furniture. We also understand how and why it can be used and how to give it the longevity that the client deserves to have.
That's a really, I mean, the logistics of that are quite challenging, I imagine. But actually, the intention then is to retain the product as long as possible, and to not to be throwing stuff out because a tiny little part of it is broken.
But it's the logistics of that isn't difficult actually, because we've been doing it for some years. Like we've got a couple of clients where, for instance, with the sofas, we designed the sofas so they can buy replacement cushions. So in the summer they buy 200 replacement cushions rather than 200 replacement sofas. We sell them chairs where if the frame gets damaged in some way, they can replace just the frame. 4 screws. A maintenance man on site can do that. You know yourself, if you've been in the office market, the number of times you'll go into an office and see a chair that's missing a caster.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and everybody says that chair is broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reality is, for us to send out a pack of 4 or 5 casters that they keep in stock, so when that happens, they just snap it in again. You've now got a working chair again, haven't you?
It's just getting people into that sort of mindset, isn't it? Of taking the time to repair stuff and and also, it's like, the flip top table I'm thinking of. I think, oh God, that if I had 10 minutes, I could fix that. I could. I'm thinking, well, where am I get the bolt from? And it's like immediately
That's it.
there's barriers. So you're there
But
to
just,
break down the
yeah, but
barriers, I guess.
see again, the issue here is that the manufacturers don't really want to know about that.
Yeah.
The the Sometimes with the client, oh well, I might as well just buy a new one. So what we're trying to do is get to the stage where we can create product lines where we can offer the replacement parts. and offer them at a reasonable price and say, yeah, they're here. It's not a problem. You can have them overnight. Yeah. Because it always gets my vote, for instance, with the, what I find is every time we do a big project, we do an O&M manual. We have to do the O&M manual, which tells you everything about the furniture that you've just bought. There are O&M manuals for other stuff as well. So every time somebody comes to us in a building that's been done relatively recently, I say, oh yeah, can you send me the detail out of your O&M manual? Oh, we don't know where it is. Well, frankly, I'd love to have a record of everybody's O&M manual, because then I would know every piece of furniture they've got and I would be able to help them make their costs as efficient as possible.
So those are the kind of mistakes that organizations make, isn't it? Of not having the information there. What other thoughts?
And it's people, don't forget, a lot of people are very time poor and they haven't got the time to pull it all together as well. It's not an easy task. Yeah. But then that's why we're here.
That's your role, to fill gaps. Yeah. Just thinking about over the years, you mentioned the Steelcase sort of office kit and how things have changed. The different types of technology, different ways of working, different focuses on sustainability. What are the changing perceptions of the client that you've noticed over or kind of the objectives of clients that you've noticed over the years?
I think the clients have moved from saying, oh, we need to get an office to fill it with office furniture, to we want to fill it, create the environment to suit the people that are working in it. So they're thinking about their staff more, and because they realize that to attract and retain the staff is actually very, very expensive. So when you get good staff, you want to keep them there. So they want them to be happy. They want them to have a workplace that's functional. I think that's the main thing that I would say. The other than that, I mean, I suppose they're conscious of making sure that people have got the right equipment for them to do the job, and whether they're working from home or whether they're working from the office. Working from home has been a big, I suppose, innovation in the market since COVID. But the reality is, I still think there's a load of people out there who when they get at home, they're sitting at a chair that's probably a dining room chair that's totally inappropriate for them. Yeah. And they're probably doing their work at the dining room table. Whereas if they were in the office, the client would have their employer would have given them a nice chair that's got good back support, that's very ergonomic, desk that's ergonomically placed, screens that are in the right place, and all that sort of thing. And well, once you start working from home, except unless you're working for some of the most enlightened companies, you're not going to have that. Having said that, we have done quite a bit of work for some of our multi-site clients, because if you've got 100 people working from home, that's another 100 multi-sites, isn't it?
Home environment as being an important part of that working.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got one social housing client who've got 90,000 sites. So that's potentially 90,000 buildings that we service and deliver to.
And so have you, with the changing sort of focus of clients and trends and things like that, have you had to change the way you operate as a business over time?
Yes and no. I think the thing I was going to say, just to add in just about clients there, is that there are a lot more clients who kind of approach the furniture companies and think that we're all a little bit like Amazon, that we've got the stuff piled high, stocked, ready to actually send it out in 24 hours notice, and are a little bit shocked when we can't. But I think what people have to remember there is that actually we are gearing up to respond to the client's needs, as opposed to we're not going out buying shed loads of product from the Far East just to stack it in a warehouse so we can deliver it in 24 hours and have it returned to us within 30 days because it wasn't quite what you thought. So that's not, but there is a perception that furniture business is like that, and it's not really. I don't think it isn't that we have changed the ways in which we work. I think we've structured our business so that we can actually handle and cover multi-site organizations to different levels. We'll have some people where we have to design the product offering so that we have got stock in the warehouse so we can send it out very quickly. We have some companies where we look at historically what they've been doing every year so that we can actually gear up to manage their requirements as they come in. I think the real thing for us is that the big change is trying to engage with the company at a relatively senior level to agree the principles of how it should function. And that's quite a big, and it's historically that's not something that people in the furniture industry have been totally comfortable
in actually approaching the client and getting them to try and buy into a different way of doing things.
Yeah, and approaching them at the right level. It's because essentially it's most of the clients that we've got that are truly multi-site and truly engaged in their thinking about it. We are talking to them at 4 or 5 different levels, all of which are relevant. Sometimes it's purchasing director, sometimes it's finance director, sometimes it's the person who's just running the site. It's trying to help people. Some companies will actually leave all the decision making to the various sites. Well, our job then is to actually let people at head office know what the sites are doing so they can actually fine tune it. So it's a constant iterative process, but it's one of where if we have the right engagement, it's very difficult not to deliver a full service and product solution that could be constantly revisited and revised and all that sort of thing. That includes all the managing product out of the business as well as managing product around the business. And it's quite, to be honest, John, that's what makes the business interesting.
That's the bit you like, you enjoy.
Yes, it's fabulous when you get, but the thing is, it's fabulous when you get that all ties in together.
Yeah.
And right, everybody from the designers to the operators to the contractors to the guys who are delivering the goods, when you've got that all rolled in together, everybody understands that big picture and how they're interfacing with that big picture. That's a fantastic feeling.
So how often does that happen?
As often as we can make it happen.
Yes.
I would say, well, see again, there's a perception that this is massive business and all that sort of. But it's not necessarily massive business, but I would say we would look at clients and think, is this client a £50,000 a year client, or a £250,000 a year client, or a £500,000 a year client? We're looking at that all the time. It happens more with the bigger clients, with the ones that recognize how much they're spending each year. It happens less with the ones that are saying, well, I'm going to let everyone do it in a devolved fashion. But we will still keep pushing the client. We'll keep talking to the client. We'll keep engaging with them locally and keep engaging with them centrally. And sometimes that's to our detriment, but when it works, it's absolutely fantastic.
So that's the same approach, really, isn't it? Of a real client-focused attitude.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds like why wouldn't it be for client-focused? But really, you're there to get the best solution, the best design, the best product, the best sustainability, the best long-term solution for
and then engage with the manufacturers that will actually make that solution work for that client. And for the next client, it might be a different set of manufacturers.
Yeah.
But that way, we're also getting the manufacturers on board to recognize that they're also part of this provision to the client as well. And we have there are some fantastic companies working in the furniture industry in the UK, and everybody has got a very much a can-do attitude. And that's one of the things that we kind of linked in with very early on. It's that can-do mentality, rather than saying, oh yeah, well, we've got this, you should have this instead. No, we can find the right products for you. This is the right manufacturer for you for this job. Now, 5 years' time, that manufacturer might change. We will recognize that with the client. We'll probably still be dealing with the manufacturer for other clients. And it's just it's understanding the full picture and understanding how to pull that together, and then not resting on your laurels. Then saying, right, come on, we need to check it. We need to keep checking it. We need to keep talking. We need to get feedback from the end users as to whether it's working or not. If it's not working, we need to change it. See what's not working.
Yeah.
It's a constant iterative process that involves advice, guidance, consultation, performance, delivery. Everybody has to come together. And it's one of the things that we did during COVID was we actually we chose during COVID not to do what a lot of other companies did. We held all our staff together. We lost nobody during COVID because we realized that it had taken us 15 years to build up that staff and that commitment. And as soon as we got 2 or 3 years down the road after COVID, we need to have those staff still there. And they are.
That's an important aspect of it. I was going to ask you about the staff. That building a team takes time, doesn't it? And as you say, you've got that expertise, and you're looking for people with a certain mind. I keep saying mindset. I must try and cut that. An attitude, isn't it, of that's in tune with what you're describing there. That long-term relationship. You don't necessarily want someone who just wants to sell. Get the like you said, get the boxes off the shelves and get them delivered. You want someone who is interested in nurturing that relationship. How
Correct.
difficult is it to find those kind of members of your team, and how do you continue to nurture them once they're within the business?
What is interesting is that we've started to add on people in the last 18 months, part of the progression post-COVID. And it is interesting that they don't all come from the furniture industry. If they have got some furniture experience, it is helpful, but you can always teach people that anyway. People that have come on board and that come on into our sales support unit or into our sales unit, they get they get the idea of this full service product provision to multi-site organizations, and they're gradually getting their brains around how they adapt their own personal sales style to that, because they can see that if you get it right, you can 3 or 4 clients and you can get your whole year's target from that.
Mm.
That's quite exciting for a salesperson, because otherwise they're saying, oh, what's the next project? Get out of my way, I want to do this one. And you're there just doing quotations and hoping that you get the deal. That's not what we're about.
So looking ahead, I mean, what excites you about the future of the furniture industry and the role that you as a supplier can have within that?
The thing about the furniture industry is probably that it always surprises you. You never really know where the next challenge is going to come from. It's funny at the moment, everybody has said to me in the last 5 years, next year is going to be brilliant. Next year is going to be brilliant. And actually, generally, next year isn't that brilliant. I think what we're going to see in the furniture supply industry is possibly smaller and smaller organizations. The days when people would have a big head office staff and loads of designers on tap. It's already like that. It's relatively small. A worry I would have at the moment is that I think there's an awful lot of people that are focusing on it and treating it as a sort of telesales business, and as a result of that, doing what we would call box shifting. I don't think that has a future. It feels sometimes that in the past 10 years, everything has been trying to drive the prices down, despite the fact that inflation has been going up. And I wonder, will there be a correction at some stage? One of the reasons I think why we're in the furniture business is because people are always going to need furniture. And tastes are always going to change. And there's always going to be churn. And that hasn't changed. The amount of churn that exists hasn't changed in the last 30 years. It's just the churn is maybe slightly different. And I wonder, will people become, let's say, the full service furniture advisors like we seem to be evolving toward? Or will they just stay back as box shifters? I really don't know. I think the furniture manufacturers are going to make sure they're designing sustainability into their products. I think that's already happening. But a lot of that happens because regulation causes it to happen. From the sales point of view, I think the clients we deal with are going to become more and more multi-site. because I don't think that the environment is brilliant for people who want to start up a company and with 8 or 10 people and stay in the one building all their lives. I think businesses are getting more and more businesses are getting absorbed by bigger entities, and I see that continue to happen. People spending time trying to integrate those businesses into what they and even now just sort of the climate for people who want to start as entrepreneurs building a business. And by that I don't mean somebody decides, well, I'm a skilled technician, I can start up on my own and do it and operate on my own. It's people who want to build a company that's going to grow. I think the climate for that is getting harder and harder.
We've had some quite turbulent years, haven't we? I guess with things like COVID and impact of Brexit, and political sort of uncertainty as we change through governments and prime ministers. But you're looking forward to the future in a kind of positive way in terms of what you can offer the industry.
I'm very positive about what we can do and where we can go, because I think we have a model that um, allows us to continue to thrive, even if there aren't that many projects. And that's a classic example. Like this year, for instance, there's been a lot of projects that got postponed for one reason or another, or pushed to the back end of the year into next year, and yet we're still tracking 10 to 15% ahead of where we were last year. That's largely because we have all the other services and clients that are not necessarily totally project focused. Whereas I think that companies that are purely project focused, if you're not winning projects, times get tough. So I think I'm personally excited about where we can go. I think we are only going to be constrained by the thinking of our people who are delivering the solution, and or constrained by the clients who are trying to help define the solution. And it's but again, as I always say, say in our industry, festina lente, make haste slowly, and that's what I quite like. That it's I remember that from my early days in school when learning Latin, and that served me quite well through life. It's easy to race ahead,
but nice and slowly.
Not too slowly, not like a tortoise, but not like a hare.
A little bit faster than a tortoise. Have you seen how fast a tortoise moves? We've got two tortoises in our garden, and they when they want to, they can shift quite quickly. I have to say.
Yeah,
you got to keep an eye on them.
I now have a picture of you racing your tortoise in the backyard.
It's a moment of stress and anxiety when the tortoises are trying to leg it for the boundary. Once they're gone, you're in trouble. If someone wants to create a space, what can they come to you for?
Well, normally what we say is the simple bit is turn the space upside down, and anything that falls to the floor, we can do for you.
Yeah.
But increasingly, we're also saying, actually, for instance, particularly if you get into things like hotel foyers or amenity spaces and student accommodation, we can also do the joinery work as well. We work very closely with a factory which works with metal, fabric, and wood, and that's quite unusual within the furniture industry. So we are able to bespoke products for clients, and we are able to actually create the joinery that enhances the space they're trying to fill. One thing I would say in terms of what I do see often, not always, is that I would be conscious sometimes that people shouldn't overfill their space.
Yeah.
I remember doing a social space in a student accommodation many years ago, and when we delivered the furniture and placed it as per the design, there was actually no room for anybody to move about. So we took half the furniture out and brought it back to the warehouse, and it may still be there for all I know. So that's it. And I do say that to people when they're moving into a new space for the first time and they haven't got experience of it. I always say, well, less is more. Our job is not to sell you as much furniture as we can. So because invariably when you've lived in the space for about 6 months, you'll start saying, oh God, I wish we did that, or I wish we'd done this. if you don't fill the space too much, you've got time and room to change. And that way you're then still coming back to spending your money on the right thing. So I always say to people, and you know that because you and I have done it many times, is you go to a client and you say, well, look, here's the end picture that you wanted. How long do you want to take to get there? Because it doesn't matter to us if you take 5 years to get there or 1 month.
I mean, it's a great point, really. You don't want to make a mistake, do you, when you're investing money like that? And often,
Yeah.
Depending on the level of engagement you've had with them, companies often don't really know what they want fully. You know, they've got an idea, but if you can get the basics in and then build from that, and it evolves, you know, I think that's something that both yours and my approach has in common, really, that idea of a design evolving alongside the client and you know, helping them get to that point rather than trying to over design it and force them into a full blown change. You know, it's often...
There's an argument that says the designer should be a constant present within the organization, because actually they're getting to see this. Actually, what I've done really works, but actually now I wish I'd done that. And the designer is more likely to make other suggestions later on in the process. And
that post occupancy kind of review, you know, which is very rarely done, and going back and seeing it in real life and what's happening, what's working, what's not working, and that approach, I think, and being able to cope with it as a supplier is really important.
Well, it's I have to say, whenever a client does that, I find the process very, very refreshing.
It's but that's a kind of rare thing, isn't it, for clients to take the time to do that? How do you go about encouraging that as an approach?
It is difficult. It is difficult. We had one client that did it about 10 years ago. They brought all of the people who'd been involved in their projects around the country for the previous 12 months together to one city. And then they bussed us from building to building. And we went to see about 7 or 8 buildings. And we looked at what had been provided. Now, it was either the paint guy or for us it was furniture. But we could see what was working and what wasn't working. And if it wasn't working, we could come up with a plan to make it work. And really, I think with the advent, being there on site and going around to see those sites was what was the real eye opener for everybody, because you're engaging with people at all levels of both organizations, and you're engaging with other people that you've worked with to deliver the end result. Now, post-COVID, we've got to a situation where you might do a review with a client, but it's probably not on a site. It's probably over Zoom. You're probably meeting people that you might not have met as part of the process before, whereas meeting them face to face makes it a much more productive engagement. So I would be a great advocate in, if you're going to meet up with your suppliers to talk about what's happening here, let's do it at a site. Let's do it where we can actually look at the practicalities of what might have been done or not done. Let's break down the barriers that we naturally have by virtue of just communicating over a link. There's no substitute for face-to-face contact with people.
That's kind of basis of customer relationship, isn't it? And building.
That was the big thing for our customer to do 10 years ago. But it was very, very productive. And not everybody has the time for it as well, because there is a sense in the world now, as soon as you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's on one project, off to the next.
Well, that's the testing process, isn't it? And that's how you learn. I think that long-term relationship is key to getting the best out of that. Yeah.
And the danger is, though, Jonathan, that because when you're doing a new building or whatever, there's so many more trades where the spend is so much more. If somebody's going to spend £20 million on the building, they might only be spending 500,000 on the furniture. The only argument I would have is that actually furniture is probably the most visible part of the end product.
It's the bit that people engage with, isn't it? It's the bit that people
It's the first impression.
Yeah, it's what facilitates the activities or the functions, So
So therefore, actually, it deserves to have its place in the review process.
I'd like to thank David for taking the time to speak to me. As I mentioned at the start, I've worked with David and his team over the last 12 years in a design support role, and it's been refreshing to be working closely with a supplier to help put together furniture schemes and interior schemes where we can work in a collaborative way with the sales team to select and specify and price up furniture packages that can help support the users of our spaces but also be delivered in a cost-effective and sustainable fashion. It's great to see the way in which David and his team are prepared to take on the less glamorous end of the supply of elements to go into spaces alongside what you might think are more exciting and interesting elements of design. The focus on a full service and a lifetime approach to the relationship of them as a supplier and the furniture that they supply is really interesting and helps to create an environment where businesses can develop their goals and also have a supply team in the background supporting that direction. There's links in the notes if you want to get in touch with FMS Interiors and benefit from their experience, knowledge and expertise in building furniture packages, then get in touch. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and invaluable advice in the setting up of this podcast, Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting for these and our educational podcasts for the University of Plymouth, and Mark Frith for the music. I'd like to hear your feedback. You can get in touch via the website or on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.